Hello for another episode of Buckshots with Trevor and Luke. We're trying to get you here within a window. I'm sure a lot of people are watching college basketball if you're watching live. I think this Illinois-Houston game is getting pretty close to halftime here, so hopefully we'll get out of here before halftime ends. But once again, back for another week of Bucks basketball. Um, Trevor, do you have an intro or anything, or should we just head right into the games?
I say just go right into it.
All right. I will say off the top of the bat that maybe we can touch on this in a little bit, but I mean, this is as healthy as we've seen the team all year. Obviously, in the Minnesota game, we didn't have Giannis. I think that was more due to precautionary and kind of rest rather than actual knee injury. So just off the bat, that was nice to see. Kind of getting everyone back, and I would assume that everyone should be back for the upcoming Bulls game on Tuesday. So with that being said, let's hit it right away. First game of the day or first game of the week, the Bucks went to Utah where they hadn't won since 2001. They came in and they broke that drought, winning 117-111. On the Bucks side, we got a 30-15 game from Giannis, 29 from Drew Holiday, 23 from Chris Middleton. Nobody else in double digits. And on Utah side, Donovan Mitchell with 29, Mike Conley with 29, Rudy Gobert with 18 and 14, and then Royce O'Neal with 12. And then I guess matching up, Buck shot 46% from the field, Jazz shot 40%, Bucks 39 from three, Jazz 35 from three. So I guess Trevor, right off the bat, this is obviously a pretty big game, right? Probably two playoff contenders, I should say, two teams that'll probably get top five seeds in both conferences. A lot of eyes on this one. To break that, we'll start with the drought there. Were you obviously? I'm sure you're happy to see they won that game. But is there something about Utah? We kind of talked about it a little bit last week. But is there something about Utah where it's just tough to play, or why weren't why was this the first win since 2001?
Well, you play there pretty much once a year.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that limits the times, but also like mid 2000s to the early 2010s when the Bucks had nothing, and the Jazz had like Darren Williams and Carlos Boozer and all those guys. They were they're never really going to win that, but I think a lot of it is mental, kind of like a little baseball reference, like the Brewers, like when they won the division finally in 2011, they were finally starting to beat the Cardinals that they were
Mm-hmm.
better than for how many years because it was just getting over that mental hurdle. So I think a lot of the same was true here as well.
Yeah, and I know players always say and coaches always say that Utah is a tough place to play, whether you like their fans or not. I mean, they're passionate fans, and I guess there's not really much else to do in Utah than to watch Jazz basketball. But I guess Trevor, I'll ask you this: going into this game, Giannis had 30 points, Donovan Mitchell had 29. Is that what you kind of expected out of these two superstars?
Yeah, yeah. The one thing that I didn't expect was Conley to play the way he did.
Yeah.
Obviously, you look at Mitchell shooting 10 of 32, 5 for 17 for deep, and you'd say, well, there's probably going to be some progression there. Some of his shots were just unlucky, but I look at Conley and I look at them both together, and, Conley was hot, Mitchell was cold. They pretty much evened out. Like that's probably about the production you're going to get from these two.
Mm-hmm.
So although the stats look very bad for Mitchell, and they are, I'm not putting too much stock into it exactly being a fluke either.
That's fair. And one thing that also stood out to me this game was it felt like obviously he's always a factor, but it felt like he wasn't dominant or anything in Rudy Gobert. It seems to me, and I watch a little bit of Jazz basketball. I've always been a fan of Donovan Mitchell. It seems to me Rudy Gobert can easily be taken out of games for whatever reason. I mean, he's a 7-foot guy who should be able to dominate on both offense and defense. In this game, he's not a total offensive threat. He only had 8 shots, 18 points with 6 free throws. But when the Bucks are starting Bobby Portis at center, it felt like Rudy Gobert should do a little bit more than only hit 6 shots. And maybe that was a Bucks game plan was kind of beat Rudy Gobert up in the paint a little bit and make him work for some shots. But are you in the same line of thinking as me, or I don't know? Rudy Gobert just didn't seem like that big of a factor to me.
It blows my mind that he they don't work with him on post moves.
Yeah,
Like I truly wonder what he does in practice because, not only did he give a max contract to this guy, but he's, to your point, he's playing 32 minutes. Lopez and Ibaka combined only played 22. If he had any semblance of post moves, he'd be able to eat down low, get him in foul trouble. Jazz probably win this game. They
right.
probably win a lot more games. But you give a guy max money and he shoots 8 times, he gets a lot of rebounds, gets some blocks, but with poor free throw shooting too, I don't know why you're paying him that money to just kind of be DeAndre Jordan light.
Right. And then just you alluded to it there a little bit. Brook Lopez is his first game back off of his back surgery. He played 14 minutes, 6 points on 1 of 4 shooting, and went 1 for 3 from the 3 point line. So only one of his shots was inside the 3 point line. I'm wondering if that was just kind of to get back in the swing of things before he kind of, I guess Rudy Gobert is always a tough guy to come back against, right? Because Rudy Gobert will play physical with you. Brook Lopez, it just felt like kind of getting the swing of things in this game. Maybe try to get a shot going a little bit because that's obviously that was a huge part of the playoff run last year was being able to bring Brook Lopez out of the paint. But were you happy with Brook Lopez's performance, or were you? I mean, I'm sure you were happy to see him back on the court. But did you expect more out of his first game, less, or walk me through your thoughts on that a little bit?
I was fine with it. I think it's hard to be mad about it. I think we talked about when he'd come back earlier because there are so many question marks. We talked about like LA April
Mm-hmm.
1st. So about a week two later. So you got to be happy that he's come back early. He has more of a ramp up. And I'm glad that his minutes were limited. I don't think he was ever going to start and play 30, but, glad if he can give us 15 to 20 until that LA game and then really be ramped up to end the regular season, it's hard to be mad about that.
Yeah, for sure. And then one other thing that I wanted to touch on the Bucks side of this game was Javon Carter played 20 minutes again, 21 minutes in this game. I really like Javon Carter. I think you're in that same mindset. Like it feels like he fits this Bucks team perfectly. George Hill, we'll touch on him in a little bit, getting ejected. But the backup guard, it kind of felt like a spot where it's kind of been a backup guard by committee a little bit. Bringing in Wes Matthews, bringing back George Hill. Pat Connaughton's obviously been hurt, but it really feels like Javon Carter fits a role here. He will always get physical with you on defense. I know on Lombardi Sweep, Zach was talking about Lucas Patrick being a dog. In my mind, Javon Carter's a little bit of a dog, and I do think that once playoff time comes, and I guess on this home stretch, Javon Carter should be able to give the Bucks big minutes, and that's talking back to when he was playing crunch time and succeeding in crunch time. So to have that backup guard kind of solidified, I think makes us a little more comfortable as Bucks fans.
Yeah, an interesting stat I looked at. I think entering this week, he was shooting 11% from inside the arc because he never takes 2 pointers.
Right.
Like he knows his role. His role is to hit threes when needed, but he's better defensively than I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but Wara. Like I said, he knows his role. He knows he's not taking that many shots. You look in this game, 2 boards, 2 assists, 1 block. Kind of doing the dirty stuff. And he doesn't force anything. He understands he's kind of the role player. He's kind of a filler. Gives to other guys to, get some shots falling for them. And when you have a guy that knows their role and is dogging on defense like that, man, it's great, great addition.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, that's all I had to say about this game. Other than it's a playoff team. Obviously, beating a playoff team is always a good win, especially in their place. And I think me and you both said that this was a game that the Bucks can win. It's going to be a tough game, and I think that was proved by only a 6 point victory. But is there anything else you wanted to touch on in this game?
No, just, looking at the third quarter again, got outscored by 13. I mean, it's man, I can only imagine what this team would be looking like if they could clean up whatever the hell is going on psychologically in the third.
Especially instead of giving up 13, like if they're only giving up 5 or 6, they win this game by double digits. Let's hop into the next game. So Bucks went from Utah to Sacramento, taking on the Kings. They won 135 to 126. Bucks side of the ball, Giannis another 30-point game, 36 and 10. Chris Middleton a 30-point game, which is nice to see. He was 2 rebounds, 2 assists, short of a triple-double, 32, 8, and 8 on 10 of 20 shooting, 7 of 10 from three-point land. Drew Holiday added another 21, and Bobby Portis with 12. Brook Lopez once again came off the bench in this game. 15 minutes, 3 points, 2 rebounds. So, Trevor, I know when we talked about this game last week, we said, the Kings are a team you have to beat. Like, Kings are, have proved since that 2002, 2001, 2002 playoff series that they are kind of been the bottom of the barrel in the NBA. Their franchise has kind of been, run into the ground. They don't keep good young players. They don't get anyone in free agency. They don't draft well. So this felt like, even though the score was close, it felt like a dominant win. Especially, the Bucks outscored the Kings 40-30 in the second quarter. And then going back to your third quarter thing, Bucks outscored the Kings in the third quarter. And I know, it's the Kings, whatever, but it's just nice to see, to win the third quarter, right? So there might not be much to talk about this game. I didn't really feel like there's any storylines, but is there anything that stood out to you in this game?
For me at first, after watching the game, you're like, damn, you only win by 9, you give up 126 points to the Kings. But for me, while I would usually be worried about that, Davion Mitchell and DiVincenzo combined for 38 points.
Yep.
They both combined to shoot 15 of 29 from the field, 7 of 15 from deep. That's not going to happen ever. Like, Dante DiVincenzo, I appreciate what you've done for the Bucks. He's not a good basketball player.
Yeah.
Since his injury, he's never been the same. I hope I didn't say Donovan Mitchell. I meant Davion Mitchell.
Yep.
He can't shoot from 3 either, so that 3 for 7 is kind of outlier. So, it's nice to get that win and kind of have the dominant victory. And although the score looks closer, I mean, you're not Davion Mitchell and Dante. Those are clear outliers for their games.
Yeah, and everyone will know Davion Mitchell from the Baylor team last year that won the championship. I mean, I was talking about this with my buddy. Davion Mitchell kind of destroyed the Badgers in that game. But yeah, I totally agree with you. As much as I like Davion Mitchell, he's not that great of an NBA player. I mean, he's still young in his career, but he's mostly known for his defense on guard. So to see him, score 19 points with 3 and 7, what are you going to do? Like you said, that's not going to happen every game. But one thing that I think should be talked about in this game for the Bucks is they shot 51% from the 3-point line, 18 of 35. And like I said, I mean, Chris Middleton, 7 of 10, that really helps to boost that percentage. But if you're looking at the other guys, Drew Holiday, 3 of 6, Grayson Allen, 2 of 3, Wes Matthews, 2 of 3, George Hill, 2 of 3, and you can even throw Brook Lopez, 1 of 3, Javon Carter, 1 of 2. And so nobody shot bad from 3-point line, other than Giannis and Bobby Portis, who only shot 0 for 2. I get Serge Ibaka 0 for 1. But is this a sign that, I guess moving forward, is this Bucks team more inclined to shoot this well compared to maybe, against the Jazz where they shot, what did I say, like 41% from the 3-point line? So is this two extremes? Are they somewhere in the middle? Or can we expect to see them one way or the other?
I think probably too extreme. The Kings defense didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I know they're big guys, they don't exactly have a center either, but they were doing too much doubling in the post. They were often coming off their guy on drives way too easily. Usually when your guy's on the other end of the court, you can bite a little more,
Mm-hmm.
but they were biting when their guy was, a 2-foot pass away, and they were giving the Bucks way too many open threes. I don't know what part of the game plan they thought that, it doesn't make sense
Right.
to do that. So that's why I don't think this will happen often. But if teams do that, I would love that. So
For sure. And obviously, I'm sure that 3-point percentage will get down once Brook Lopez keeps getting into it. Not that he's a bad shooter, but I mean, if you add another player, it's more, percentage is more likely to go down than go up. But I mean, once again, it was a good win. I mean, there's not much to say about this game, right? You went to Sacramento and you beat a team that should be beaten. To kind of add to that to the last playoff stretch here. Anything else you want to mention about this game? I should say Domantas Sabonis was the leading scorer for Sacramento with 22 points, which makes sense because it always seems like the Bucks struggle a little bit to guard those stretch fours, and Bobby Portis isn't the greatest defender like we've been talking all year. And Domantas Sabonis is still a good player. So if Domantas Sabonis is scoring 22, that you'll have to live with that, especially with, like we had mentioned before, Davion Mitchell and Dante DiVincenzo scoring 19 apiece. But sorry, that was a long-winded question asking you if if you had anything else to mention about this game.
No.
So let's hop into the, I guess the I don't even know what you want to call it. Whatever. The Bucks finally went to Minnesota yesterday, where they took on the Timberwolves. Giannis was out of this game, like I had alluded to at the beginning of the show, with knee soreness. And I think both me and you agree that maybe it's kind of just a resting kind of thing on a Western Conference road trip, and there's no concern there. But the Timberwolves beat the Bucks 138-119 on the Bucks side of the ball. Nobody over 15 points. You had Brook Lopez, who started with 15 points in 20 minutes. Chris Middleton, 15 points. And you had Pat Connaughton back for his first game since he broke his finger, or tore a ligament in his finger, with 15 points. Otherwise, Drew Holiday, 14, Grayson Allen, 13, Javon Carter, 11, and Thanasis, 10. So, Trevor, before I dive into Minnesota stats here, let's say the bad happens in the playoffs. Giannis goes down with an injury. Maybe he can't play a series. Does this game worry you, seeing that nobody was on, and you're not really getting you're kind of getting production from a lot of guys rather than a lot of production from a couple guys? Is that a little worrisome?
Not really. 3-point shooting for the Bucks is decent. Shooting from the field, from the free throw line was decent. I mean, they put up 119 points. That's what you expect. The Timberwolves just really kind of shot the lights out from three. No offense to them, but they're not a team that's going to shoot 47% from deep very often. Anthony Edwards is not a very good 3-point shooter. Karl-Anthony Towns is great, but 4 for 6. That's a pretty good night for anybody. D'Lo, good 3-point shooter, but again, 4 for 8. That's pretty good. And really, I think a big thing in this game was the Bucks shooting. Serge Ibaka was horrible, 1 for 11.
Mm-hmm.
I never understand how you could shoot that poorly and keep on shooting.
Right.
That's just not something I understand. Same with Bobby Portis. I know he's a shooter, but 2 for 10. Start finding other people once you hit that 1 for 5 range.
Right.
But I think the big story was just the ejection. Pat Beverly and George Hill got tossed. I can't for the life of me understand why George Hill got tossed. We can go into it a little bit later, but that takes the wind out of your sails. George Hill is not a great player, but he's a solid 6-man guy, and losing him in the middle of the game when you're already down Giannis, it's just like, what the hell? Where do we go from here? And I think that did a lot more than just losing George Hill would usually mean.
Yeah, and as much as I love him, Patrick Beverly, you either love him or hate him. You love him if he's on your team. You hate him if you're playing against him. That's what his role is to get under the skin of an opposing guard and get him ejected, get both of these players ejected. Because really, if we break it down, Patrick Beverly isn't a great NBA player, right? He's just a guy, like I said, that you want. He's the enforcer, I guess, or the kind, not the enforcer, but kind of the get under the skin and the agitator, I should say. So it makes sense. I mean, whenever Patrick Beverly's playing, you're going to get controversy, you're going to get confrontation. I guess it's probably better that it wasn't someone like Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton, right? But George Hill's been in the league forever. I'm sure that he's kind of sick of. Probably wants to be treated with a little more respect than Patrick Beverly, chirping at him all game. So I do understand why George Hill got suspended, and I agree, or not suspended, ejected. I do agree with you that he shouldn't have got ejected, but it makes sense going up against a guy like Patrick Beverly. And I just wanted to touch on Anthony Edwards there for a little bit. You're right that he's not a great 3-point shooter, right? But he is a good. I don't know if you agree with me, but he is a good basketball player. I think a lot of people were kind of under the mindset of we have kind of an unknown. Maybe it's a guy with a little untapped potential here that we can try to develop within the next 3-4 years, along with Karl-Anthony Towns. This dude has played well since his first game in the NBA. He's first round pick out of Georgia 2 years ago. So he can play in my mind. I would love to have him on the Bucks. I know it's obviously it won't happen, but Are you in the same? Do you agree with me? Because I've talked to a lot of people about Anthony Edwards, and I've gotten a lot of different opinions on him.
Yeah, the really only knock on his game that I've seen is 3-point shooting. He's shooting 35% from three this year, which is not bad at all. In the last 10
Hmm.
games, he's shooting 42% from deep. So,
Right.
I mean, if he can even lock into a 39 to 40, he's at another level. We're talking all-star caliber. I like him a lot. I think really the only problem for him, unfortunately, is playing in Minnesota. Like, Minnesota
Yeah.
is not a small market, but the Timberwolves have been so bad in their franchise, you know, not trying to be disrespectful, but it's truly just been a calamity of errors that when something good gets there, we just don't pay attention to it.
Hmm.
And I think that hurts him because he's a solid player.
For sure. I will mention that Minnesota is currently in the seventh seed in the West right now. So maybe things are turning around a little bit for them. And I don't know about you, but I've always been kind of a Minnesota fan. I know Minnesota and the Bucks have kind of, at least in our lifetime, both like sucked and kind of been bottom feeders in the league. So I do have some feeling for them. And I've always been, I was a fan of Andrew Wiggins a little bit when he was there. Zach LaVine, I was a fan of when he was there. So Minnesota does have a little soft spot in my heart. It's tough to say that about a Minnesota team, but to talk about that 3-point shooting, Minnesota shot 22 of 47 from the 3-point line, while the Bucks shot 19 of 52. And I just want to ask you this: is 52 threes too many in a game for the Bucks?
I think it kind of depends on who you're playing.
Yeah.
They took 97 shots, so they took a lot more shots than they usually do.
Hmm.
So I don't think in that instance it's bad, especially when you're shooting it at a 37% clip. That's decent. If you're shooting at a 20% clip at halftime and you're putting up 50 for the game, then I'd agree. If you have somewhere in the range of 80 to 85 shots, I'd agree as well. But in this game with everybody putting up a lot of shots, Bucks getting a lot of chances, a lot of possessions, I don't mind it too much.
Yeah, and you have to imagine, does Carl Anthony Towns score 25 points? Does Anthony Edwards score 25 points? I mean, does Naz Reid score 14 points if Giannis is playing in this game? Probably not. I mean, Giannis is still the leader. I would say the leader in defensive player of the year right now. So this feels kind of like an outlier in what the Bucks season is and what it might finish as. So, I mean, we've been doing this all year, breaking down games without a fully healthy team. But I feel like this is once again another game that Bucks probably win if Giannis is playing, right?
Yeah, and kind of going back to Minnesota, I just looked at the standings. I didn't notice it got this close. Now Minnesota, to your point, is a 7 seed. They're only a half game behind Denver right now, and the 6 seed is the cutoff for that playing game.
Hmm.
Like Minnesota's 9-1 in their last 10. They're red hot. That would be really interesting to see Denver, as good as Jokic is, in a play-in spot. That would be really tough for any of those other three teams to get a spot in the playoffs.
Especially just talking, I guess, Denver basketball here a little bit. I read Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are close to coming back, so I would imagine that that they are probably going to be pretty close to full strength by the end of the season, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be a probably a tough matchup for any team, considering the Nuggets have been to Western Conference Finals very recently. But Trevor, I just wanted to talk about the MVP race a little bit before we preview games. Um, right now, I'll start off with this. I saw a tweet yesterday that said something along the lines of, "I wish we had Kevin Durant for a full season, then we could really see a great three-man MVP race between Embiid, Jokic, and Durant." And I think this guy got ratioed, saying with every single comment, asking where Giannis is. Giannis is, like I said, is probably the number one in defense player of the year right now. He's second in scoring, and at one point in the season, he had the highest PER in NBA history. I think I know your answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is Giannis getting disrespected again?
Yeah, I think it's because he has two. Like, first of all, I think Jokic is good. They're a 7 seed. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care about injuries. He's or a 6 seed right now. You're not going to win as a 6 seed unless you're putting up Russell Westbrook type triple double numbers. Say what you will
Mm-hmm.
about Russell Westbrook, but the stats he was putting up were insane. Right now, Philly and Milwaukee have the exact same record, and Giannis has 0.2 less points per game. He's fifth in rebounds, obviously third in points per game. He's playing 32 minutes a game, like just over that. In over the course of the season, I believe. Let me see if it's this year. But his minutes per game is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 32.9 minutes a game. He's playing less than Tyler Hero, and Tyler Hero is up for sixth man of the year. Like, he is producing MVP numbers. He's doing it in way less minutes than an Embiid, way less minutes than a Jokic. And the team has the same record, and the team has had injuries up and down. You can say what you want about Ben Simmons, but we knew that. And so you just look at that, and you look at Embiid. He has over almost a minute and a half more per game, same stats, not defensive player of the year. I just don't. I think Giannis is ahead by a hair. So to not even have him in the conversation, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and like you said, it's probably because Giannis won 2 in a row recently, right? But Giannis hasn't. I mean, whatever. Like fuck you, right? Giannis hasn't won an MVP in 2 years now. This is arguably his best season he's ever had as a pro, and that I think that was that's proved by his high PER this year. If you have a higher PER than Wilt, I think your name has to be in MVP conversations, right? So, do you think there's anything that Giannis can do to kind of get his name in that MVP conversation, or do you think the media is like, no, no matter what he does, we're not giving this guy MVP?
I think it's pretty much decided he's not going to get it. Like
Mm-hmm.
Embiid, he's played 2.5 more minutes per game this year. His shooting from the field is down 2%. His shooting from deep is down 1.5%. His shooting from the free throw line is down 4%. His rebounds is up 0.7. Assists is up 1.6. Blocks, steals are the same. More fouls. 0.1 less turnovers. One more point per game. It was basically the same season as last year,
Mm-hmm.
probably a little worse. And he
Right.
wasn't even really in the conversation last year. So just because he is not injured for half the season means he's the MVP now. Like, that's not how that works.
And just to clarify, we're not saying Joel Embiid's a bad player or anything. Obviously, he's a top 5, top 7 player in the NBA right now. I agree with you. It seems more. It feels like Giannis is having the best season of his career, and if he already has 2 MVPs, how can you not at least have him in the conversation? But with that being said, who is your prediction for MVP right now?
My prediction is unfortunately probably Joel Embiid.
I
Like
think so
like you
too.
said, I'm not saying he's a bad player, but like Giannis put up, what was that? I think it was like a 40 something point performance.
Mm-hmm.
And like the next day, he wasn't even a part of the conversation for MVP.
Right.
And Embiid puts up 35 and 10 on 20 free throws, and that's all anybody talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at Philly, I think the Ben Simmons situation is going to give him more votes. It's going to be interesting to see, too, because their schedule is kind of difficult, but then they end the season Detroit, Charlotte, Cleveland, Indiana twice, Toronto, and Detroit. I think he can pick up a lot of easy wins, a lot of easy stats, and if they edge the Bucks in the standings, I think those that don't really take a deeper dive are going to take that as proof that he is the MVP and it's not close.
I'm almost wondering too. If the Lakers somehow go on a run and get to the playing game and somehow get into the playoffs, I would imagine that that LeBron would probably finish ahead of Giannis as well. Just obviously LA media, people have really kind of turned 180 again on LeBron. Feels like that's been going on his whole career, where people loved him, then hated him, loved him, hate him, uh, loved him, then kind of hated him when the bubble came. And now everyone's kind of back and loving him again. So I'll probably say I would imagine Giannis probably finished around that four mark, because everyone loves Joel Embiid too, or I mean Nikola Jokic too, and for some reason people don't love Giannis, and I don't understand that, because the guy feels like he just does everything right, doesn't get in any trouble, doesn't get in fights with teammates, coaches, whatever, just a guy who wants to learn and play basketball, and for some reason he gets shit on for that.
Well, to your point, like when Giannis won his second back-to-back MVP and then they lost to Heat in the bubble, he was crucified. I
Yep.
mean, he didn't really win the MVP by as much as he should have even that year.
Hmm.
Even with that crazy record of like 50 and 11 at one point, something like that. He was crucified for that. Was basically taken out of the MVP the next year just for that. Jokic and Denver did the same thing.
Hmm.
And now they're in the sixth seed. They're possibly in a playing game, but for some reason he's ahead of Giannis with the same kind of injuries, less stats, and more minutes. So it's interesting that Jokic is beloved and Giannis is kind of cast to the wayside because they're the same guy, like
Right.
personality wise. So that's just weird to me.
Yep. And I guess I created that new segment 2 weeks ago, and I forgot to mention it. But Trevor, just going back to last week, who was your MVP of the week?
I think it would have to be Giannis.
Hmm.
Close win over Utah, 30-15. Sacramento win 36-10. Chris Middleton probably the honorable mention. Leading score against Minnesota isn't saying much, but red hot against Sacramento, decent against Utah. But that's not exactly a shocker to any that Giannis is the MVP favorite and Middleton is second.
Right. And if someone wants to dispute that, I don't think anyone staked their claim as having a better week than Giannis. With Giannis out of the Minnesota game, no one had a great game against Minnesota. I mean, you could argue the best game against Minnesota was Pat Connaughton, whose first game was back. So I think that tells you what you need to know about that, about the Bucks' performance against Minnesota. But let's look into this coming week, where the Bucks are back at home on Tuesday against the Chicago Bulls. Trevor, both you and I have kind of been critical of the Bulls all year. I think we both agree that we like the players on the team. We like kind of what they have set up, but they can't win big games. I think I read they're 0-15 against top three seeds in both conferences this year. Do you think that trend continues against the Bucks on Tuesday?
I mean, they are so cold. So I guess there's two ways of looking at it. Either they finally wake up or it keeps going. I think the advantage the Bucks have is they have not played. They will not play Sunday. Obviously, they have today off. They have Monday off, and then they play Chicago at home. Whereas the Bulls have to play Toronto tonight, or excuse me, Monday, and then go to Milwaukee Tuesday. Not exactly a long travel, Chicago to
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee, but coming off of Toronto, that's not a guaranteed win. And then going to Milwaukee, man, I think how they play against Toronto is going to be a good indication because the Bucks offense has been doing a pretty decent job as of late.
Maybe too. This is kind of a thing where maybe it's a letdown game. I like the Bulls. They're back to back, right? And we've been talking all year about back to back. You try to like the NBA should. You probably can't get rid of back to back games, but there's probably less than there are. It feels like Chicago may come out a little slow, little lagging in this game, going up against two playoff teams right in a row who are both teams are vying or need wins to secure higher playoff seeds. So I agree with you. To see what they do against the Raptors is gonna be huge. If they go down early against the Raptors, maybe they rest everyone and put their focus on the Bucks. If they go up big against the Raptors, maybe same thing. But if this is a tight, grind it out, fight it out game, kind of what the Bucks have had against the Raptors the last couple of years. This seems like it could be not an easy win, but a favorable matchup for the Bucks in this game. But just to break some stats down, Bulls shooting are second in the NBA at 48% shooting from the field, while the Bucks are 12th with 46. But the real disparity here is the Bucks shooting 14 or making 14 threes a game, while the Bulls only make 10, which is Bucks are fourth in the NBA, Bulls are 28th. Do you think, I had asked you before, if 52 threes was too many in a game? Is this a game where, maybe they win on three-pointers, especially with Brook Lopez and Pat Connaughton back?
I mean, for sure. You know, I think the Bulls have the players. I just don't understand how they think mid-range pick and roll,
Mm-hmm.
DeRozan taking 30 shots a game is going to win you championships. It's going to win you series, or it's going to even win you a single game against top tier teams. Obviously, it can happen, but the Bucks have played pretty poorly the first two meetings and still are 2-0 against the Bulls. So, when the Bucks are shooting those threes, if they start falling and all Chicago can do is hit mid range, it's going to be a wrap by half almost.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. But I think the Bulls are a team. They're young. It feels like another team that could come out and kind of bop the Bucks in the nose in the third quarter, like we've seen so much. So I would imagine that's something to watch out for. But like you said, if the Bucks can get going early, like this could be a long game for Chicago. I could even see the Bucks going up, 15-20 around the halftime mark, which would be great to see against the fifth seed in the East right now.
And I think, an important thing to note about this, let's give the Bulls benefit of the doubt, say they do beat Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
If the Bucks win again over Chicago, with 10 games left, Chicago's 3 games behind the Bucks and they don't have the tiebreaker.
Right.
While they do play the Bucks one more time, again, if the Bucks were to win, that game wouldn't matter. And although the Bucks have a hard schedule, like you said, Chicago hasn't been able to beat any of the top teams. So, them exactly going 10-0 isn't really looking to be in the cards either.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, we were just talking about MVP stuff. I'm on the Score app right now, and there's an article on MVP rankings. In the image for the article, they have 5 players showing: Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, LeBron James, John Morant, and DeMar DeRozan. So they don't have Joel Embiid or Giannis in there. So that can show you what people think about Giannis right now. In this game against the Bulls, I'll mention before we move on, Lonzo Ball is still out with a knee injury. Giannis they have him listed as game time decision. I'm wondering if that's, I guess in NFL terms, you call it sportsmanship kind of thing. I would fully expect Giannis to play in this game. It didn't, nothing stood out to me in any of the Bucks games I watched last week that, he tweaked his knee or anything like that. So for everyone worrying about that, you would imagine that Giannis will play in that game.
And I think the Bucks only have 2 back-to-backs the rest of the season.
Yep.
One is 2 of the last 3 games in the season, and then the next one is very end of March into April 1st. So, yeah, I see him playing when they play Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday this week.
Yep. So let's hit Thursday there. Bucks host the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are 10 games under 500, 30 and 14, or 30 and 40, 11th in the East. I there's not much to say about it's hard to talk about the Wizards. Bradley Beal's out for the year. Kyle Kuzma, he's been hurt this year. I'm just looking at this. Like they have key players on here. The key player for the Wizards that they have listed is Kristaps Porzingis, and I don't think that scares anyone. He hasn't really filled out to what NBA teams thought he would. And I remember when the Knicks were booing him when they drafted him, and that the Knicks fans might have been onto something there. Not necessarily Porzingis' fault; he's been hurt all the time. But Trevor, this is a game where the Bucks should win by double digits, right?
It has to be at home. Like we said earlier, it's not a back-to-back. Especially if you lose to the Bulls, it's a must-win game, but it's as close to a must-win game no matter what anyways.
Yeah. It shouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't think it, this almost feels like a game where it's like maybe a Giannis 19, 10, and 9 game, and maybe a Chris Middleton 20, and then maybe you get someone like Jordan Nora putting up 25 points or something like that off the bench. So I think we're both in the idea that this game should be easy win and not really much to talk about, and I'm not really worried about it. So I think totaling it up there, it sounds like we're both on the idea that Buck should at least be 2-0 to start this week, right?
2-0, 1-1 isn't bad as long as you beat the Wizards. Like you can't lose to the Wizards after you beat the Bulls.
And a game that may throw a thorn in the Bucks' side is on Saturday when they travel to Memphis. Obviously, the big story with Memphis is John Morant being out right now. Don't know about Saturday yet with the knee injury. John Morant, who had an incredible season, who's a very good player. Memphis, who, believe it or not, is second in the West right now, 48 and 23. So what is that? 25 games over 500 with a young guard playing. John Morant, like I said, such an incredible season. But I don't want to say is this the biggest test of the season, but the Bucks don't see Memphis a lot, this will be a really, I guess, interesting and fun game for Bucks fans to watch. If you're watching, I know there's gonna be some March Madness going on. But if your bracket's already done and you're kind of pissed off about March Madness, watch this Bucks game because these are two young superstars. If John Morant plays Giannis against John Morant going at it, for really it feels like the first time in their careers. So Trevor, are you as excited as I am to watch this, or you're tune in at least a little bit to this game?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because the last time Bucks played Memphis, they won by 12, but Memphis was out Bane and Dylan Brooks, so
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's not anywhere near indicative of how it's going to go. I think it's going to be interesting too. We'll obviously talk about it next week, but that is a brutal East Coast ish trip.
Mm-hmm.
That next week that kind of starts. So you talk about momentum, whatever you think about it, you just can't put up a dud in that performance on Saturday.
Yep. Um, yeah, and I totally agree with you. Are the Grizzlies having a magical season? Yeah. Are they set up for failure in the playoffs? Maybe. Especially if Denver sneaks in at that 7 seed, that'd be a fun matchup to watch. A healthy Denver versus a healthy Grizzlies first round. But I'm just talking some stats here. Grizzlies don't shoot too well from the field. 46. I guess they shoot all right. 46%. Bucks shoot 46.4%. But the Grizzlies only make 11 threes a game. While like I had mentioned before, the Bucks make 14, almost 14 and a half. So once again, it feels to me that 3-point shooting could definitely be the key here. But the only thing that worries me is the Grizzlies are first in the NBA in steals per game, and if the Bucks come out flat in that third quarter, like we've become accustomed to, the Grizzlies, I guess this is all dependent on if John Morant plays, but the Grizzlies could get up in the third quarter and maybe tough for the Bucks to kind of climb back into that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Grizzlies too, in games decided by 3 points or fewer, they're 4-3. That's not what you usually see from a top tier team.
Right.
And against teams above 500, I'm not knocking this record, especially since the Bucks are 18-21 against teams above 500. But 20-15, certainly not what you'd expect from a team that's 48-23 on the season. That's really not that much better than Dallas, and they're the 5 seed. So against an over 500 team in a game that's likely close, it's going to be a test for Memphis as well, for sure.
For sure, and like I had mentioned before, if you're all pissed off about March Madness, definitely tune into this game. It should be a fun one. But on that note, Trevor, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of Bucks basketball, NBA, anything in general?
Just keep an eye on the East. The West is pretty much all shaken up by now. The East, obviously, who's going to be in the playing games is pretty much all decided. But Boston is still on an absolute tear right now. They're only a game behind Philly and the Bucks. So the 1 through 6 seed, man, yeah, I mean, the next 2 weeks are going to be insane. And even after 2 weeks, we still might not have an answer. So if your brackets are busted, I mean, hey, you got help.
It'll be a fun stretch to go. On that note, that's all I got for Bucks and NBA. Trevor, how's your bracket doing? Who'd you pick to win? Who's your final four?
Well, I have two kind of different ones.
Okay.
The one in ESPN, I will. We're talking men's tournament, right? By the
Yep.
way,
Yep. Sorry.
ESPN 93rd percentile. I'll take that.
Yeah, not bad.
Arizona, Gonzaga, Purdue, and Kansas. So they're still not
So
dead.
all four are still
That's
alive yet.
that's pretty much the point. Just whoever has the least chance of losing early. How
Right.
about you?
I have Gonzaga over Kansas in my championship, and I have Arizona, and I had Kentucky in my final four. So that's tough, but it seems to me that not a lot of people are taking Gonzaga, so I'm kind of banking on Gonzaga winning and kind of making up for that Kentucky loss for me.
And I mean, 3 out of the 4 Final Four teams. That's probably going to put you in a pretty decent space.
Yeah, I also had Carolina over Baylor yesterday in one of the craziest games I've ever seen.
Yeah, I did that in one of my brackets. Didn't have the stones to do it in the other, and I'm still kicking myself for it.
I know I'm kind of pissed because me being a North Carolina fan, and I kind of wish I would have taken them to the Final Four just for the hell of it, especially with Kentucky losing early to St. Peter's. That's one other thing I wanted to mention. I guess it can tie this into the Bucks. Our coworker at Flurry, Jake Senholz, He does a little bit of everything, kind of like we do with all sports. He had tweeted out, "Where do you see Drew Timmy in the NBA?" And I tweeted out, "He's going to look nice as a ninth man on the Bucks." I don't know if that'll happen, but is there anyone that sticks out to you? I think the Bucks have like the 23rd pick in the draft. We'll talk some draft early here. Is there anyone that sticks out to you that maybe could be available there that you would want? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
Let me wait for these best remaining prospects to load. I think with Brooks' injury and how he's getting older and obviously not moving as well. I think one of the big things is definitely center.
yeah.
What pick did you say the Bucks were
Right.
looking around?
I think there have. I looked at a mock this morning, and I think based on what's standings right now, they're right around the 23 mark.
All right. I think a center is kind of what you're looking for. Maybe try to get a tall Mark Williams.
Yeah,
Great rim protector. He can space it. Great rebounder.
athletic as hell.
Big wingspan. I think you can look at a guy like him. I think he'd be good. Maybe if you're confident, look at one of those guys like Khalifa Diop and
Hmm.
Ismail from Paris. They're big centers. See what you can have there. But for me, my guy, and maybe they trade down to get him, Oscar Shibwe,
Yeah.
255. He's a little undersized at 6'9". But I think that's something where if you have him as an undersized center, I think that's okay if you have Giannis at the 4. I think that kind of makes up for it. And the last guy I'll throw out there is Christian Coloco, block specialist from Arizona, 6'10", needs some weight, but just one of those big center guys.
For sure. And just to speak on Chibwe a little bit, maybe I can imagine his ceiling in the NBA being something like a Montrezl Harrell if he can get his offensive game going a little bit, kind of bringing energy and using his butt to clear out the paint, like we've seen Montrezl Harrell do so much in his career. But yeah, Mark Williams is who I had in my head, and he's obviously the center from Duke. So it should be interesting. Usually you kind of get an idea of who can kind of fit where in the NBA with March Madness going on. I've been saying since Kofi Cockburn has been kind of dominating in Illinois. It'd be fun to have him on the Bucks. I don't know if he can play in the NBA. Kind of a slower guy, not great athletically. Maybe a second round pick, and then I realized that the Bucks don't have a second round pick this year because Woj broke the Bogdanovich story too quickly. So thanks for that, Adrian Wojciechowski.
He'll be interesting to see with free throws as well.
Yeah, for
He's
sure.
had a lot of trouble, and I'm sure they're starting again, but he had a lot of trouble against Chattanooga with double teams as well. So
Hmm.
that'll be interesting to see if he makes it.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that's all we got here. I'll plug stuff like I always do. Lombardi Sweep, go check it out. Us too. Should be a very interesting show on Wednesday, to say the least. Check out Zach Bruner, our boss. He's got a new USFL podcast going out with Justin McCrae, right?
Justin or Jordan, one of
Yeah,
them.
one of them. Whatever. He plays. He's been playing everywhere, so you get all the inside scoop of USFL stuff, players, coaches, whatever. Flurry Sports Podcast is still going on. Check out Zach and Jake there. Check out Jake and Henry on Burnt Rubber Racing, and we'll still have a ton of more March Madness stuff coming along with betting previews. If you want to make some money, check those articles out because I'll be a little cocky here. We're right more than we're wrong with those. So so stay tuned for all that stuff and enjoy the rest of March Madness.
Have a good one.